The heat is on. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, charity disaster, reputational disaster, professional disaster, financial disaster. It's all coming together.
She made some very, very poor strategic errors, thinking she could profit from the title without any consequence, without paying the dues. And of course, in the end, I have no doubt there'll come a day when they both lose their titles, and their children too, because they will just be forced to go too far for their own survival, and at that moment the same will happen to them as what's happened to Prince Andrew.
At war over money, they need $10 million now.
Tom Bower has spent nearly a decade studying this marriage, and he didn't sugarcoat it. Bower said that as long as Harry stays married to Meghan, any talk of them relocating back to Britain is, in his own words, completely untenable. Not difficult, not unlikely, untenable. That single word carries serious weight, and buried underneath it is a number that explains everything. By Bower's own estimate, the life the Sussexes have built in California costs somewhere between $3 and $6 million a year just to keep things running. That's the number this whole story keeps coming back to. Here's the picture that credible insiders are now painting, and it's a tense one. Harry, by every account, wants to go home. Bower describes a man who feels frustrated, out of place in Britain, and losing ground fast in America. Meghan.
Charles has made it very clear that he wants Harry back. You know, we saw it in Harry's book, Don't Make My Life a Misery, but don't make my final years a misery, boys. Charles's dearest wish is to be reconciled with his son.
Of course, there are constant bust-ups, I guess is the point that I'm making. And of course, there is tension over Harry's desire to spend time in the United Kingdom, but Meghan knows she needs to come back too. She's going to have to turn back on her word, and that is for financial reasons.
By every account, has zero interest in stepping foot back on that island. One is pulling toward London, the other is planted firmly in Montecito, and the thing standing between them isn't the palace. It's not King Charles either. According to those who've studied this couple the longest, what's blocking that door is the marriage itself. That's a heavy claim, but this isn't just one man's opinion. The striking part isn't that Bower said it. The striking part is how many others are standing at that same door, saying nearly the exact same thing. By the end of this, it'll be clear why a biographer who was raising red flags before the wedding is suddenly looking very right. Now, let's talk money, because almost everything in this story flows straight from it. Harry is not broke, and that needs to be said up front. When he turned 30 inches 2014, he inherited roughly £10 million from his mother's estate. Then, on his 40th birthday in September 2024, he received another reported £8 million from a trust the late Queen Mother had quietly set up years ago for her great-grandchildren.
They need $3 million just to survive each year, just to meet their minimum security needs. So I really think we can't frame this in any other way other than a pay for play, a desperate, grab for cash. And I think that just comes down to it, that they really need the bucks.
Harry and Meghan want to destroy. They might want to be there, but they want to destroy. That's why they're going ahead. That's why they're putting on smiley faces. That's why they're doing all sorts of things. But I don't believe in what they want to do at all. I think they're crooks and nasty people to try and win.
This man walked into his California life with serious money behind him. But here's what those inheritance headlines always leave out: a lump sum, no matter how large, is a bucket. And a lifestyle that burns through $6 million a year is a tap that never shuts off. There's the mortgage on a Montecito estate. There's private security now fully out of pocket, ever since the British state stopped covering it. Then there's the staff, and the legal bills, and those are not rumours. We know straight from the courts that Harry's case against the publisher of the Daily Mail had budgets of roughly £4 million approved for each side. His earlier settlement with the publisher of The Sun was widely reported to go past £10 million. These aren't gossip figures. A judge signed off on them. So when Bower estimates the Sussexes need $3 to $6 million a year just to stay afloat, he's not manufacturing drama for a book cover. He's doing the same math anyone would do at their kitchen table. Money in has to beat money out every single year, or the bucket runs dry. The real problem with their kind of income, it doesn't come in like a paycheck. There's no steady deposit on the first of the month. It's one big deal, then a long silence, then hopefully another big deal.
It's very interesting, which I was surprised by, and comes up early in the Betrayal book, is when a very, very famous member of the British establishment, really a household name, is asked by the Queen to explain to Meghan before the wedding what life will be like. And that person goes to visit her every 3 or 4 weeks in Kensington Palace, and after the third and fourth visit tells the Queen that Meghan has absolutely no intention of staying in Britain after the wedding, and there's a lot of trouble ahead. Of course, it was too late to do anything, but they saw it long before that glorious day in June. And I'm afraid that that is her problem. She is very calculating and very ruthless and very self-promoting, but she's taken on more in the end than she can chew.
The Netflix arrangement made the early numbers look manageable, but that engine needs fuel, and the next tank is never guaranteed. A life that costs $6 million a year isn't something you quietly scale back when the offers slow down. It's a treadmill and someone has to keep it moving. This is exactly where the money story and the marriage story stop being separate, because the one place on earth where Meghan genuinely cannot earn the way she wants to earn is Britain. That means the most affordable version of their future and the most lucrative one sit on opposite sides of the Atlantic. Remember that it matters more than almost anything else here. Tom Bower has a phrase for where this marriage has landed, and it's been making the rounds. He calls it an unfortunate crossroads, and what he means is specific, so here's the breakdown. Harry is 5th in line to the throne. He was raised inside an institution where the whole point was service and status, not a salary. Ambition for him was never really about money. Meghan came from a completely different direction. Her ambition, by Bower's reading, is material, professional, commercial. And the problem, he argues, is that she now finds herself somewhere she can't build what she planned to build. Put those two people inside one marriage and for a while, the tension stays under the surface.
And now Harry has suddenly woken up and gone, oh, actually, yeah, you've got to have this stuff called money. It's this folded paper that's in your trousers, and that's how you get stuff. And I didn't really know that until I left England and stopped being a member of the royal family. So Meghan's told me I need to get more of this folding paper, which has got Dad's face on it. And we could also get some of the American paper, which is green, and that's got like a big S on it with lines down the middle. Anyhow, Meghan said she wants more of this colourful paper and that we're running out of the colourful folding paper that's in your trousers. Yeah.
The Netflix money flows. The brand looks strong. Everyone smiles for the anniversary post. But pull the easy money away, and suddenly these two are being driven by completely different engines. He wants what Britain gives him: standing, identity, belonging. She wants what California gives her: control, business, power. And before anyone says Bower is just trying to sell books, that's actually the moment to slow down. What makes this hard to dismiss isn't his opinion of Meghan. It's that he's not the only credible voice at this door. He's just the loudest. Two other people who've spent years studying this family are circling the exact same conclusion from completely different angles. And one of them saw it coming before the confetti was even swept off the floor. That's the part that should make you stop and pay attention. Not just the prediction, but the fact that more than one serious, credible voice is arriving at the same place. So, if Harry wants to come home, why isn't he just going home? Because by every credible account, the one person who won't make that journey is his wife. Royal biographer Angela Levin laid it out plainly. Her read is that Harry and Meghan have, at some point, decided they'd like a way back into royal life, but strictly on their own terms. In Levin's words, they want roles they can control, not the roles the institution hands them, but roles they get to design themselves.
He hasn't got a clue. It's a catastrophe. They need $10 million now. Because you know as well as I do, folks, that you've got to have a buffer. You cannot be down to your last dollar. And yes, there are some savings. There's a little bit of money from the books fair. He got 20 million for that. There is the inheritance from Diana and from the Queen Mother, who is the mother of the late Queen Elizabeth. He got millions when he turned 30.
Harry she keeps arguing that they need taxpayer-funded security, and you're sitting back looking at Meghan dripping in gold, posting pictures of her closet, posting pictures of her children, saying, are you not increasing the odds of somebody targeting you by putting your wealth and your children and your home on full display?
And that one phrase explains exactly why the door stays shut. The British monarchy doesn't do roles you control. It's possibly the one job on earth built entirely around the opposite. You take the duties you're given, you stand where you're told to stand, and you show up whether the cameras are kind that week or not. Meghan, by every account, connects Britain with the most painful and overwhelming chapter of her adult life. So here you have one partner who sees that island as the place that restores him, and another who sees it as the place that nearly broke her. Think back to this past April. The two of them toured Australia together, smiling, holding the line, doing the polished work of looking like a couple moving in one direction. And by all accounts, they can still pull that off for a weekend when the cameras demand it. But a tour has a start time and an end time. What Levin and Bauer are describing is what happens after the plane lands back in California, when the performance is over and two people are left wanting genuinely different lives. Levin also describes Harry pushing his father to hand over some responsibilities. And here, it's important to be straightforward. The king is currently receiving treatment, and that deserves real respect, not speculation. So only what's on record matters here. Harry, by these accounts, has been asking for a foothold. The answer, so far, has been no. Here's an honest take on all of it. A marriage can survive two people wanting different things that happens all the time. What it struggles to survive is two people wanting different countries.
And that's what happens if you marry a guy who's not that bright and who has no discernible talent and whose only value are two things: inherited cash, which he didn't earn, and selling the family secrets. Well, both of those sources of income look like a busted flush, and the cost of their lives is extraordinary. You're looking at $3-4 million a year, easy. $3-4 million, potentially $5 million. The mortgage alone on their Montecito mansion is $500,000. And don't forget, interest rates are going up. So if they have to negotiate again, if they have to do a new deal, good luck.
You can't meet halfway across an ocean. Someone has to give up the thing they want most. And so far, by all the reporting, neither of them is willing to do that. Now for the part that's genuinely hard to shake, because it turns this whole story from a snapshot into something that looks more like a prophecy. Long before any of this, biographer Andrew Loney sat down and described what was being said inside the royal household in the years right before the wedding. According to Loney, the conversation was not the fairy tale the public was sold. The talk, he says, was about how unsuitable the match was and that the whole thing would end in tears. You can take that two ways. You can call it bitter hindsight, the kind of thing people say once a marriage is already in trouble. Or you can sit with the uncomfortable possibility that a room full of people whose entire job is reading other people read this one correctly years ago and were completely ignored. Make of that what you will, but when the person who predicted it would fall apart is watching it fall apart in real time, you have to stop and pay attention. And this is where the official line starts to wear thin. For years, every time the cracks showed, the public got handed the same polished reassurance. They are stronger than ever. They are a united front. Their representatives have flatly denied any trouble. And Meghan herself has said on record that she believes the two of them are forever. No one's calling anyone a liar here. But there is a real difference between what a couple says and what a couple does.
When they left the United Kingdom 6 years ago, this was the plan, a sort of failed deal with Netflix, everybody hating you and being a kind of laughingstock and being a social media influencer, basically. Like that, as I recall, was not the plan, right? The plan was this whole new model of service. They were going to show the Queen didn't have any idea about service. They were going to show her how it was done.
And what they've done over these last months is mark 8 years of marriage, with a video, not a moment, standing side by side while Meghan flew off solo and Harry, once again, talked openly about the country she refuses to return to. By all accounts, this is not a marriage in flames. It's something quieter and honestly sadder. It's two people who clearly care about each other, standing on opposite shores, with neither one willing to cross. So where does a standoff like this actually go? As it turns out, there's a date on the calendar that's about to put every word these biographers have said to the test. This July, Harry is due back on British soil for an Invictus Games event, the one project that is entirely his, the one even his harshest critics struggle to dismiss. The question isn't whether he shows up. He will. The question is who, if anyone, stands next to him. Bauer doesn't believe the half-in arrangement Harry seems to want is ever coming. Asked directly whether Harry could pull off a part-time royal role, his answer was blunt. He said he does not believe they have a chance.
Sources say that the couple are so unhappy that it resulted in a massive bust-up over their plans this summer. I was the first reporter to reveal the strains in the marriage in Montecito. The mainstream media has been very slow to catch up, but Heat magazine has gone there this week with a front-page cover story revealing the specific argument was about Harry's demands for Meghan to return to the United Kingdom.
And if the biographers are right about the marriage, the most likely picture this summer is a quietly painful one. A man back in the country he misses most, doing the work he's most proud of with the seat beside him empty, and a wife who chose California over a single weekend in England. Here's what to watch for, and it's worth remembering. If Meghan stays away from that event entirely, everything Bauer and Levin have been saying stops being theory and becomes something you can see with your own eyes. If she surprises everyone and actually shows up, maybe that door isn't as sealed shut as it looks. Either way, July is when the talking stops and the reality begins. Don't expect any early answers, though. These things get managed right down to the last possible second. There will be no announcement until it's almost too late to announce anything at all, and that's entirely the point. A statement can be drafted, softened, and timed perfectly. A grandstand cannot. On the day, those seats are either filled or they're not, and the entire world is looking at the exact same picture at the exact same moment. Because you can deny a rumor, you can release a statement. You can post a sweet anniversary clip with cake and a song. What you cannot do is fake a marriage in a grandstand, in front of the world's cameras with one empty chair saying everything that no statement ever could. So let's bring it back to that one word we started with, untenable.
And this insider has said the marriage is strong. This is what they said. They love each other. This isn't about divorce or separation. It's about Meghan pushing Harry to adapt to a world where they can't rely on royal status or inherited wealth forever. Well, is Meghan deluded or what? Because Harry is never going to become commercially successful. Because beyond his royal meal ticket, there's nothing.
Meghan flipped, and a normal argument turned into a showdown. Tensions are at an all-time high. Now, you'll remember Meghan returned from Geneva and there was a big song and dance made about the couple's wedding anniversary. I think that was part of the flood the zone strategy, which was desperately designed to sort of say, nothing happened, it doesn't matter that only 10 people showed up. But at the same time, perhaps it is because she's even trying to convince herself that things were on track in this relationship.
When Bauer uses that word, he's not throwing it around loosely. He's not reaching for drama. He chose it carefully, and it means something very specific. Not difficult, not complicated, not unlikely. Untenable as in, the position cannot be held, as in, something eventually has to give. And when a biographer who has spent nearly a decade inside this story reaches for a word that precise, it's worth sitting with it longer than a headline allows. Their representatives, for the record, deny any trouble. Meghan herself has said forever, on the record, and that matters because these are not throwaway words either. A public declaration like that carries weight, and it would be unfair to simply bulldoze past it. For all anyone knows, they will quietly outlast every prediction, prove every biographer wrong, and be celebrating another decade together while the rest of the world is still debating the July grandstand. That outcome is genuinely on the table, but here is the thing about stripping away noise. Once you pull back the tabloid headlines about blazing rows and slammed doors, the stuff that can never really be verified and tends to feed on itself. What remains is actually more unsettling than any of that.
I've never seen somebody try so hard to prove that they're not the most unpopular person in the world.
Someone who fled England because she needed her privacy.
Yeah.
Never let us forget that.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, it's absolutely astonishing. And then, of course, the publication of all her very top secret wedding photographs.
Oh, yeah.
To mark the 8th anniversary. That as well, absolutely another invasion of her privacy. I mean, she is literally digging and digging and digging, looking for something to get attention, and probably can't understand why there isn't a huge wave of adoration for her. She's actually puzzled why people don't love her, and that makes it even more interesting.
Because what remains is sourced. It's on the record. And it comes not from one voice, but from 3 separate people who have spent serious time studying this family from different angles, using different methods, arriving at the same place. That kind of convergence is hard to dismiss. Bauer calls it an unfortunate crossroads, not a crisis, not a catastrophe. A crossroads, which is almost a more disturbing word, because a crossroads implies a choice that hasn't been made yet. It implies 2 people standing at a fork, each one looking down a different road, neither one willing to say out loud what they both already know. A crossroads is not the ending.
You know, when he was writing Spare, that's when they were aligned in purpose. They were both trying to put stain on the royal family. They all didn't, Harry and Meghan didn't want to show them any grace. They wanted to completely rag on their life in the UK. But now Harry has turned over, and now he, I believe, is feeling very regretful. And now they're no longer aligned in purpose, and they will continue to clash. This is the beginning of many more arguments. And the question then becomes, how long can they sustain the relationship no longer aligned in purpose?
It's the moment just before the ending becomes inevitable, or the moment just before someone surprises you and turns it around entirely. Levin's framing cuts from a different angle. Her read is that Harry and Meghan want back in, but only on terms the institution was never going to offer. They want roles they can control, and in any other world, in any other career, that would be a completely reasonable thing to want. Most ambitious people want to shape their own path. Most driven, capable adults push back against structures that feel limiting. That instinct is not a character flaw, it's actually a sign of ambition. But the British monarchy is not most careers. It is possibly the single most structured institution on earth, built over centuries on the precise idea that the individual bends to the institution, not the other way around. The moment you start designing your own role, you've already broken the fundamental contract, and the palace, whatever its many flaws, has never pretended otherwise. The rules were always the rules. What Levin is pointing to is not a villain making unreasonable demands. It's a genuine, painful mismatch between what 2 people need and what one ancient institution is structurally capable of giving. And then there's Lowney.
And can you describe Harry now compared to the Harry you knew? How would you characterize Harry in 2026?
I think he's a nasty, spiteful liar. Thinks only of himself, terrified of Meghan, and that he wants to get the royal family switched out so he can get switched in and give Meghan the best job ever. I think he wants her to be queen. I think I've told you that before. But with Harry, you know, he's determined that everybody thinks that she is as amazing as he does, but he's got it all wrong.
The Buckingham Palace plot to reunite Prince Harry and Prince William is going to fail. This story has really divided the royal community.
His contribution to this story is the one that should linger the longest, because it doesn't live in the present tense at all. It lives in the past. According to Lowney, the conversation inside the royal household in the period leading up to the wedding wasn't the fairy tale being sold to the public. The word being used, he says, was unsuitable, and the quiet consensus among people whose entire professional purpose is reading people and situations was that the whole thing would end in tears. Now sit with that for a second, not because it's gossip, but because of what it means if it's true. It means that a group of experienced, serious people working inside one of the most closely observed institutions in the world looked at this relationship before it became official and felt a deep unease they couldn't ignore. And then the wedding happened anyway, and the world cheered, and anyone who expressed doubt was dismissed as a cynic or worse. There are two ways to read Lowney's account. The first is that it's the kind of thing people say after the fact.
That's the truth. It's always been nothing. Meghan doesn't want to see people who she either no longer finds useful or people she thinks are not going to go along with the grift anymore. And the royals saw right through her most of the time. And once she could get out, she doesn't want to face them. She's a coward in many ways. She doesn't want to have people, especially when she's interacting with Harry, people who know the real Harry, the Harry before Meghan, and her seeing them interact. Like, she wants this control and she wants to always be the victim. And so she has, I think, in many ways concocted this whole, again, crazy scenario where they're under constant threat so that she has this convenient out to actually see the people that she should.
On one hand, a group of people who are absolutely convinced that King Charles is working behind the scenes via this new Deputy Private Secretary, Theo Rycroft, to try and bring Harry and even Meghan Markle back into the royal fold. The view, Angela, is that they are politically aligned, that King Charles III wants his legacy to be about union, not to be about the divide.
The wisdom that suddenly appears once the outcome is already visible. Everyone's an expert in hindsight. That reading is fair, and it deserves to be on the table. But the second reading is harder to shake. The second reading is that the warning was real. It was there before any of the public drama started, and it was ignored because the fairy tale was too compelling and too useful to too many people for anyone to pump the brakes. If the second reading is correct, then what Bauer, Levin, and Lowney are collectively describing is not a marriage that fell apart because of outside pressure. It's a marriage that was carrying a fracture from the very beginning, and that the pressure of the last few years didn't create the problem, it revealed it. And the thread running through all three of their accounts is the same. It always comes back to two things colliding: money and geography, not incompatibility of personality, not the pressures of fame.
The feeling generally in Britain is the marriage isn't going to last. Harry will, I'm afraid, still remain with you because his children are there. She kind of got him away from his friends and his relations into another country, and she could control him then. But he was kind of stuck with her. And I think that seems to be the feeling here with Harry. He wants to build some bridges. I think his father is keen to reunite with him to see his grandchildren. William clearly is against it. The king is caught between the two brothers, and whatever he does, he's going to upset one of them. And it's a bit of a mess.
Not even the genuine difficulties Meghan has spoken about publicly regarding her time in the royal spotlight. Those things are all real and all relevant, but they're not the engine. The engine is this: a life that costs several $1 million a year to maintain can only realistically be funded in one place, and that place is not Britain. It is California, Hollywood, the American media ecosystem, the world of brand deals and streaming platforms and speaking fees and all the commercial infrastructure that Meghan understands and navigates and genuinely thrives in. Britain, by contrast, is the place where that machine doesn't run. The UK media landscape is different. The commercial culture around royalty is different, and the very thing that gives Meghan her earning power in America, the Sussex brand, the narrative of independence, the carefully cultivated identity built outside the palace, doesn't translate the same way back on that island. In fact, in many quarters it actively works against her. So the most affordable version of their future and the most lucrative version of their future are not in the same place. They are separated by an ocean, and that ocean is not moving. Here's the harder question that nobody in the mainstream conversation seems willing to sit with long enough. What happens to a marriage when two people genuinely love each other, but genuinely need different things, and those things are not just different in preference, but structurally incompatible? Not irreconcilable in the way that means the relationship is broken, irreconcilable in the geographical, financial, institutional sense.
But it's interesting that when there have been occasions where the king could have met Harry, I mean, not least in his recent visit to the States, that didn't happen. And I think there's always a suspicion that Harry will leak any encounter they have, and the story will be sold to the newspapers. So it is a bit of a mess. No one wants a dysfunctional family like that, but I'm afraid that is the story of the royal family. They can't seem to get on with each other. All those things are kind of, again, undermined because of attention being focused on people like Harry and Andrew, when there is so much good that they can do, but which gets ignored. So my experience is, talking to people, they're not anti-monarchy, but they are anti the monarchy abusing its status in order to make money for itself.
In the sense that one partner thriving necessarily means the other one sacrificing something they consider fundamental to who they are. Harry, by every account, feels the absence of Britain like a physical thing, not nostalgia in a soft, wistful sense, but something sharper. A loss of standing, a loss of identity, a loss of the role he was raised from birth to inhabit. He was never supposed to be a brand. He was supposed to be a prince in the fullest, most institutional sense of that word, and whatever complications and pain came with that life, it was the life that gave him definition. Without it, by Bauer's reading, he is a man standing in California with money in the bank and no idea what he actually is anymore. Meghan's situation is almost the mirror image, and that's what makes it so difficult. She found herself inside an institution that, by her own account, was not built for someone like her. She struggled, she suffered, she left, and in leaving, she built something new, something that is genuinely hers, genuinely successful on its own terms, and genuinely located in the world she came from and understands. Asking her to walk back into the environment she walked away from for the sake of a role she would have no control over is not a small ask. It's an enormous one.
What happened with the Duke of Windsor is he did every so often come back and see his family, as long as his wife didn't come with him, and that we're going to see more of that. We have a sign that Harry may be able to come back and have security paid for by the taxpayer here, which will make him feel safer.
Despite the loved up post on Instagram, we're told the couple are at a standoff over their summer. As well as the Balmoral trip, the plan had been for Meghan to join her husband in the UK in July for a one-year countdown event to the 2027 Invictus Games taking place in Birmingham. However, our source says Meghan has now told Harry to go without her. They add Meghan's bust up with Harry was a big one, and she's digging her heels in. She's told Harry to go to the UK without her, as there was no way she would be joining. She doesn't want to put herself or the kids through the drama.
And the fact that she appears unwilling to make that sacrifice is not hard to understand, even if it puts her directly in the path of what Harry needs most. So the real story here is not about villains. It's not about who's right and who's wrong, who sacrificed more, or who handled the transition better or worse. The real story is about two people caught in a situation where love alone is not sufficient currency, where the practical realities of money, location, identity, and institutional belonging have created a set of competing pressures that no anniversary video and no public statement can actually resolve. And that brings everything back to July, back to that grandstand, back to that seat. The Invictus Games event this summer is not just a calendar date, it's a test. Not a test anyone designed deliberately, but a test nonetheless, because it places Harry back on British soil, in his element, doing the work that defines him most cleanly and most positively. And it places the question of the marriage in the most visible possible setting, not in a tabloid story, not in a biographer's pages, but in a live, public, internationally watched moment where the seats are either full or they're not.
Then you've got the fact that the veterans in Invictus, because it's a special event for injured veterans, military people, served in the army, served in the navy, served in the Air Force, who have either mental health problems or indeed they've lost limbs, other issues, and they compete at the top level of competition. The problem you've got is those veterans are not happy, because Invictus should be about them and their achievements, but it's about Harry and Meghan. So Invictus is a disaster.
Bauer has already gone on record saying he doesn't believe the half-in arrangement Harry wants is ever coming. His exact read was that he does not believe they have a chance of pulling off a part-time royal role. That's not a maybe. That's not a wait and see. That's a flat assessment from the person who has studied this situation longer and more closely than almost anyone outside the palace walls. If Bauer is right and three convergent voices suggest he very well might be, then what July delivers could be the moment where a quiet, private standoff becomes a public, undeniable reality. A man back in the country that defines him, a seat beside him that stays empty, and a watching world drawing the conclusion that no statement will be able to walk back once the cameras have already shown it. If Meghan turns up, if she steps onto British soil, stands beside her husband, and shows the world a united front in the most pressurized possible context, then the biographers will need to revise their read. That outcome would mean something real, not just a performance, because a grandstand in front of that many cameras is not a place where performance is sustainable. Either the partnership is functional enough to hold in that moment, or it isn't. There is no careful PR management of a live event. There is only the picture. What to watch for is simple. Not the statements leading up to it. Those will be managed, softened, timed, and carefully worded regardless of what's actually happening.
And I don't think very long, because you have to look at the fact that Harry is losing out when it comes to his children knowing anything about him and his future or his life that he had in the UK. Their whole lives is going to be spent in America. And Harry will never be able to have his children experience anything that he experienced, Harry, when he was growing up. This I believe is very hurtful to Harry. He is starting to see now that he is missing out and his children are missing out. And that Meghan is controlling everything. And I feel, is feeling very regretful. He is looking at Meghan as someone that is controlling his life completely, despite how he feels. So it's just the beginning for him. It's going to get so much more worse.
Not the social media posts, those are curated by definition. Watch the seat, watch whether it's filled or empty, watch what the image says before anyone has had the chance to explain it. Because that image, whatever it turns out to be, will carry more information than anything either of them has said publicly in the last 2 years. And this is what makes Bauer's original words so precise, so stubborn, so impossible to shake. Untenable doesn't mean over. It doesn't mean broken beyond repair. It means the current position cannot be maintained indefinitely. Something has to shift. Someone has to move. And the longer neither of them does, the more that word starts to look less like a biographer's opinion and more like a simple description of physics. 2 people, 2 directions, 1 marriage, and an ocean between them that has never once in the history of the world agreed to move for anyone. So here's the question, and it's the only one that actually matters right now. When July arrives and the world's cameras are pointed at that grandstand, do you think Meghan will be standing right there beside Harry? Or does that seat stay empty and let the silence say everything the statements never could? Drop your answer in the comments below. Be specific. Make your case, because every single comment gets read and the conversation down there is always worth having. If this story gave you something to think about, hit that like button. It makes a real difference in getting these stories out to more people who actually care about them. Share it with someone who follows the royals closely, because this is exactly the kind of thing that gets more interesting when more people are watching it unfold together. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. There is a lot landing this week. The next one drops in just a few days, and it goes deep into what Lowney's reporting says was really happening inside the household in those final months before the wedding. The conversations that were being had behind closed doors, the concerns that were raised and then buried, the full picture of what people close to the institution actually believed before the world ever got to watch that ceremony. That one is going to raise some serious questions, and you'll want to be here when it does. See you then.